Atheist Nomads, episode 210, Republican Atheist?
The podcast you're about to listen to includes cursing and talking about hoo-haws. Please be advised.
Welcome to another episode of Atheist Nomads. I am Dustin, and joining me today is Gary Mitchel.
Hi, everyone.
Gary is the president of Idaho Atheists, and he was previously on the show probably about 2 years ago.
I think I did one about, I don't know, it was under a year ago, I think.
No, it's been a while.
Has it been that long? Jeez.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, it's been a while.
More often.
Good to have you back on again.
Good to be back.
Later in the episode, we will have an interview with Lauren Ell from Republican Atheist, and Lauren will be helping me out with that interview. And I will have some statements to say about the interview later on, but please be aware that if you want the full interview, become a patron. If you're not, you will still get the gist of it and most of it. But I will be cutting some of the discussion where it got a little bit more into clarifying a little bit too much, perhaps.
Give money, you guys.
Yes, give money. Anyway, because we have an interview, we aren't going to have a dusting off the degree. We are going to jump straight into news. But before that, Gary, how have you been?
I've been well. How about things by you?
Doing pretty good.
I see the new car on the drive.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty excited about that. The family truckster.
Yep, it is the family truckster. I like it. It is a 2007 Hyundai Santa Fe. We got a really good deal for it. It's got 96,000 miles. So most of what we were seeing was 1,000 or more than that with 100,000 miles more. And so 96,000 miles at the price we got was pretty damn good. And with where Fits tend to be selling right now, we should be able to sell that and pay off the loan completely. That'd
be awesome.
Yeah, but we took it onto some soft roads and some light off-roading yesterday, and that was a lot of fun. Something I haven't been able to do since I sold the Ram.
Is it an all-wheel drive?
Yes, it is.
Nice.
All-wheel drive, and has a smaller V6. Still has a decent amount of get up and go. So far, yeah, I am definitely quite pleased with it, and it's going to be a lot easier with a baby in that car.
Definitely, yeah. The back seats are, well, they're made for kids. Literally, I don't know about the fit. I think the fit's more, city lifestyle, but yeah.
The fit's really good for a courier car.
Yeah.
What's crazy with the Santa Fe is there's places to anchor 3 car seats. I don't know if you could actually fit 3 car seats in it, but it's got the anchors for a car seat in any of 3 positions.
Yeah, you're halfway to a Mormon mobile, really, at that point, with just 3.
Yeah, and a proper Mormon mobile is a Ford E350 15-passenger van.
Yeah, right, with tons of stickers in the back window.
For all of your bazillion children and 3 dogs, and yeah.
Sister wives and...
Yeah, if you see a big Ford 15-passenger van, probably Mormon. If it's got a husband, wife, 3 kids, second wife, 3 kids, dog, cat, another wife, more kids, definitely Mormon.
Yeah, if it doesn't have a college symbol on the side, it's for Mormons, for sure, yeah.
But yeah, it's good.
It's a good vehicle. I'm glad for you guys. That's expanse right there.
And it's so nice to be riding high again.
Yeah, the fit was very low to the ground. Yeah, I've driven it a couple times. It's pretty low to the ground.
Yeah.
Even it feels lower than my car, which is probably actually sitting lower. But
yeah, and then aside from that being the family car and the Fit being my commuter, or not the Fit, the Jetta being my commuter, we also have the Santa Fe as the adventure vehicle and my Jetta for the trip car.
Good idea. Yeah, so you don't have to tear up your Jetta. Yeah, that's smart.
Yeah, keep it on pavement. So that my new goal with the Jetta is 350,000 miles.
I think it'll do it.
It's definitely doable, yeah. Anyway, let's go ahead and jump into some news.
Yes.
First off, we have current DoD policy allows trans service members to be able to transition, including coverage for counseling, hormone therapy, and at least bottom surgery. If top surgery is included, that's not yet known for sure. And the heads of the military branches have asked for an extension to figure out how to handle trans recruits. They've asked for an additional 6 months. So that so far is pretty good. And honestly, asking for more time to figure out how to accommodate people who are mid-transition or planning on starting transition, going through boot camp, that is probably a little overly cautious, but they're just wanting more time to figure out how to handle it. They're not asking to reverse it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
This was a complete shock. I don't think anybody on the inside had discussed this. It was all on the outside, as far as I can tell.
Actually, some conservatives in Congress have proposed budget amendments to bar funding for transition care for trans service members. This failed in committee, so they asked Trump for help. His response was a series of tweets that read, "After consultation with my generals and military experts, please be advised that the United States government will not accept or allow transgender individuals to serve in any capacity in the U.S. military. Our military must be focused on decisive and overwhelming victory and cannot be burdened with the tremendous medical costs and disruption that transgender in the military would entail. Thank you."
Well, if anybody knows about burdens, it is Trump.
Well, for one, that does not sound like a Trump tweet to me.
It does not. That sounds like a Pence tweet.
Yeah. But in response to this, the Joint Chiefs have issued a direction to not make any changes to policy until clear guidance is received through the proper channels. In other words, President to Defense Secretary to the Joint Chiefs and the secretaries of each of the branches, and then they work on policy, with the DoD working on general overarching policy and each branch working on its own individual policy. You know, for example, the same exact rules don't apply for the Air Force, which you're typically on a base for several years and deployments tend to be very short. That doesn't apply necessarily the same to how life is in the Navy, where you might be put on a ship that isn't going to have a full medical staff. So allowing for each branch to then apply the larger policy, that is necessary. A blanket policy coming from a fucking tweet is ridiculous.
Yeah, how we've gotten there is kind of, it's a bit beyond me that we can have a tweet changing the course of our military, first of all, and our nation in several ways on top of that. But that's a serious change in everything we've ever seen. And I can't imagine another nation doing that.
Yeah. Well, so the Joint Chiefs aren't accepting that as a change in policy. Defense Secretary and retired General James Mathis is appalled by the tweet. And if you want to talk about Trump's generals, most people would assume it'd be him, you know, Mathis and the Joint Chiefs. They're not having it. And even some of your more conservative members of the Senate are condemning this, including Orrin Hatch.
Yeah, when you've got Orrin Hatch against you on something conservative, you've gone way too far, I feel.
Right. John McCain, that one doesn't surprise me because he's the maverick. And even though he's been playing ball with the rest of his party for quite a while, he has terminal brain cancer. He literally has no more fucks to give because he has nothing to lose.
Yeah, I mean, well, he's the one who appointed Sarah Palin as a VP. Like, he kind of lost the giving fucks, I think, some time ago. But yeah at this point, I think he might, you know, be a little off the deep end to some degree. But also, yeah, he doesn't really have to care.
Right.
You know, not about most anything that happens in his life. That's
right, and that's just a really narrow list of how many conservative or at least Republican members of the legislature have said, "Oh fuck no." This is absolutely absurd. For one, tweeting policy. No, that is not how it works.
Yeah, we sent out a memo so everyone gets the exact same memo, and then the different branch heads can disseminate the information of that memo to the underlings, and decipher what it means for that branch or that department or whatever.
And that's not even the correct way for the president to create policy. That is called an executive order.
Right.
That is how the president makes policy. That is how Obama started to change the policy to allow transgender service members to transition while in the military. It was through an executive order. Trump can change that, but it's too late because policy has been written. So he would have to issue a new executive order to direct the Department of Defense and the branches of the military to create new policies, new regulations. You don't fucking tweet it.
Honestly, you shouldn't really tweet anything, but yeah. directives to the military are probably not the best things on Twitter ever.
Oh man, one joke I heard about this was that people in the Pentagon were checking Twitter to see if he was announcing a strike on North Korea, and they found this instead.
Somehow, that doesn't surprise me a ton.
I hope that was a joke.
Yeah.
I'm not convinced it necessarily is.
I could see that as a plausible thing in this day and age, that's where you go for his information.
Right. And what's been so awesome is, I don't remember her name, but there was one trans former Navy SEAL from SEAL Team 6 who was on the raid to hunt down and kill bin Laden. And since leaving SEAL Team 6, she has started transition.
I saw the posts about her, but I did not know that she was SEAL Team 6.
Yeah.
That's pretty wild.
If the whole point of this is to ensure that our forces are ready, she killed bin Laden.
That should account for something.
Whether or not she was actually the one that pulled the trigger is irrelevant.
Yeah. Like, you would think a voice would be able to get through, at least, if since the country, honors the military the way that they do. You would think somebody with that on their resume would be able to be heard and have a voice in the conversation that we're not having. It's just it came from above. So,
and heck, the concern that it's too expensive. Okay, with I think I saw anywhere from 10 to 15,000 transgender service members in some reports on this. With that many, if Trump just stopped going to Mar-a-Lago for his golf trips, it would pay for all of them.
Yeah, I think just the security for probably a couple months in New York would probably pay for that many soldiers, I'm going to guess.
And actually, I think the with the trips, it's just the one so far this year.
Yeah, right.
And the year's not over yet. That's literally all it would take.
I saw today, I think he's up to 45 days on the golf course this year.
The fuck?
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're going to take a quick break. Atheist Nomads is proudly brought to you by Archway Hosting. Check out their low-price, full-featured hosting solutions at archwayhosting.com. That's ARCHWAY hosting.com. We've been using them since early 2014, and the only time we've had problems, it's been my fault. So Archway support is always fast to respond. They are good to fix it, and I love their service. If you're looking for a website, check them out. They are well worth your consideration, and their prices are fucking awesome. And we're also brought to you by listeners just like you. You can find out how to become a patron at patreon.com/atheistnomads or atheistnomads.com, and just look on the right-hand side of the page and look for the links. And we have some feedback. First one, we have an iTunes review with the subject of, "I'm so excited." This is from Tefel Hunden. In the U.S., I've always been a devout listener. With the recent changes in the lineup, I am so excited to hear more commentary from Rocco Taco. That's awesome. We're glad somebody likes it when Rocco barks during recording. Regarding episode 208 from Duncan on Facebook, "Did I mishear you, Dustin? You're actively avoiding having straight white men on Atheist Nomads in the future?" Yes, Duncan, you did mishear me. I do not have a goal of not having straight white men on. I have a goal of making it be rare when the only voices on the show are straight white men. That is a big difference. Right now, Lauren isn't on the show, but Gary is, and Gary is a straight white man.
I am indeed.
So right now, it's only 2 straight white men. Later this episode, there will be 2 women. So we'll have that diversity represented in this episode. But yeah, the goal is not to not have straight white men, just not have it be only straight white men. And regarding episode 209 from Marlo, fun to listen to and great job, Alicia. Yay. Marlo's my sister-in-law, so that's not surprising that she liked her stepdaughter on the show.
Alicia did a great job, though.
Yeah,
I felt.
Oh yeah, I did a little bit of gushing at the end that I ended up editing out, but yeah, she did great. Back to news. Police chiefs from Houston, Austin, San Antonio, the Corpus Christi Independent School District, representatives from Harris County and El Paso sheriff's offices, other law enforcement officers, and numerous public school officials have all spoken out against Texas's new bathroom bill at a public safety rally at the state capitol in Austin. Literally, a whole bunch of cops showed up and said, this does not help with public safety. The Houston police chief, Art Acevedo, said, it may be great political theater, but it's bad on public safety. The Austin police chief, Brian Manley, said, if a bill like this were passed that would pull officers' time away from combating violent crime into enforcing a bathroom bill, it makes communities less safe. This is time not spent ensuring community safety.
Yeah, this is that small government thing right here.
Yeah. San Antonio police chief, William McManus, said, I asked my department to go through the record. What we found is this. There were no known incidents of bathroom assaults performed by men posing as transgender women. I am a believer that if you propose a bill to address a criminal justice concern, it is important to determine if there is an actual problem you are trying to solve.
And that problem is scared Christians.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only problem that exists here.
Yeah.
No one else gives a shit.
Yep. The Corpus Christi Independent School District Chief of Police, Kirk Warnke, said, school districts face multiple issues that the legislature could help with, but the bathroom bill is not one of them. So the Speaker of the House doesn't want to do this bill because he doesn't want the death of Texan teens on his hands. Police chiefs don't want to enforce it. Schools don't want to enforce it. It's the lieutenant governor that wants this to happen, and he's going to keep trying to push it.
I've not researched this enough. I forget who the lieutenant governor is currently, but Texas has become...
Dan Patrick.
Okay, the name's familiar.
Mm-hmm.
I forget all of his exploits and misdeeds, but Texas has increasingly become a much more liberal state, or a much more blue state at least, and he might be kind of a holdout. I'm guessing. I think they've been electing more and more, especially Dallas, Fort Worth, and Austin. Huge areas, much more diverse than they ever were before. Much more liberal. And I'm gonna guess that he's probably barely hanging on politically and won't be there for very much longer.
Yeah. If Mexicans realize they can, Mexican Americans, to be more clear on that, realize they can vote, Mexican citizens cannot. Mexican Americans can. There's a big distinction there. And if Mexican Americans in Texas more of them realize they can vote, Texas would become very purple very fast. Yeah.
Of course, there's probably the Mexican citizens were probably the 3 million, illegal voters that Trump was talking about during. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Oh, actually, with that, no, he was talking about me.
Right. Yeah.
When Idaho joined this regional database to share voter information across states and try to purge people who shouldn't be voting, my voter registration was canceled. I got a letter from the county clerk informing me that my registration was canceled because I was registered in Washington. I called the county clerk's office and explained, yes, I registered in Washington when I lived in Washington. I moved to Idaho and I registered to vote in Idaho. I have not voted in any Washington elections since moving to Idaho. And they recorded that comment, and then a week later, I got another letter in the mail saying they acted prematurely, and everyone's voter registration has been reinstated, and they will look at this again a little bit closer.
Yeah, I remember hearing a little bit about that prior to or post-election.
Yeah.
That all they did is cross-reference names from one state to another that were, registered voters, as if people don't move on occasion.
All right, and for our final news story, Trump has appointed Amy Coney Barrett to fill a U.S. Court of Appeals vacancy, and she believes that the Bible takes precedence over the Constitution and that a judge's faith should come before precedent.
She seems fun.
She's Catholic, and she mostly has these views because she wants to overturn Roe versus Wade. and the contraceptive mandate that has basically been thoroughly gutted anyway.
You know, and I have to hand it to Catholics these days that are that conservative, given their new pope, who speaks out against pretty much everything that they espouse.
Yeah.
There seems to be a severe disconnect in the last, I don't know, decade or so. Well, especially since the new pope is a bit more progressive than the last one. But do they not listen? Is there not a hierarchy of power and order anymore? Or?
Yeah. This is just weird. But no, if you don't think this is a problem, replace the word Bible with Quran. And if you think that's a problem, then placing the Bible before the Constitution is a bad idea.
Yeah, hell, you can replace it with Dune, and the answer is still kind of the same.
Right,
like,
yeah.
You're going to get some bad ideas.
And what's actually kind of fun is with conservatives, you can get them to agree, like the ones that don't already agree on church-state separation issues, you can agree when you point out that if Muslims reach a tipping point in the population, which they're all a lot of them are terrified is going to happen, that we need church-state separation to make sure they can't use the Quran to justify legislation and court rulings.
Yeah, that good old Sharia law fear that they keep espousing, which, as Richard Carrier pointed out to me, the blue laws are literally Sharia law. So I don't think they really mind those all that much.
Yeah. So yeah, if you think that somebody putting the Bible before the Constitution, now living your personal life, the Constitution doesn't tell you how to live your life. If you choose to let the Bible tell you how to do that, that's fine. If you want to legislate that, the First Amendment kind of says no. And the U.S. Constitution also does have a hierarchy of what is the law of the land. And it's the Constitution, treaties, and federal laws, and then state laws. That is the precedence. The Bible is not in there.
Look at the atheists that are against Amish on a regular basis. Like, it just doesn't really happen because they don't interfere in our politics.
Right.
They want nothing to do with our politics. They want to live their life as religiously as they can via their own religion. Outside of the weird rape instances that occur that don't get reported, for the most part, it doesn't really harm that many people. And that's kind of what everyone wants. That's secularism.
Yeah.
You live your life your way. Let everyone else live their life their way. That's kind of the root. And for some reason, people want just to keep enforcing their own view of the Bible. You change this view a little bit, they're not going to like it either. Giving the information in the Bible and how arbitrary most of the information is. I'm doing air quotes on information. Any little deviation, that's why we have multitudes of different churches. No one can actually agree. So the looking around for just a couple minutes, I can't believe that they don't understand and can't comprehend secularism.
Yeah.
It kind of blows my mind. But I have to believe that they're smart enough in their quest to see the problems with them. Yeah.
Well, I think that sums it up pretty well. Yeah, this woman is crazy. She does not deserve to be on the bench.
No.
If you think anything comes before the Constitution in your rulings, you should not be a federal judge. You should not be a judge. If you're a lawyer, you should probably be disbarred.
Yeah, I think some states probably would, honestly. Yeah.
So, on that note, Gary, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me again.
And after the bumper, we'll have the interview. Joining us now is Lauren Ell of Republican Atheists. Lauren, welcome to Atheist Nomads.
Hi, thank you for having me on the show.
Okay, so what is your organization?
The organization is Republican Atheist, and I launched Republican Atheist in April of 2017, so it's relatively new, and I launched it to connect with other atheists who were registered Republicans or take interest in conservative ideology.
Okay, so then your target is atheists who are Republicans, then, right?
Yeah, I really was influenced from different atheist groups. Some people might find this interesting. I've been atheist since I was 18 years old, and I've gradually tapped into the atheist community here and there for the last 10 years. I'm close to 30 years old now. And I've gone to different atheist meetings in Southern California, which is where I'm born and raised, Southern California. And I've also participated in various Facebook atheist groups. And during the last 2 years, I started to voice my more political views because we had the campaigning going on for the 2016 general election. And I started to share my views in these groups. I also focus a lot on mass migration in Europe. And so I noticed that when I would speak up in atheist groups and speak about Islam and more conservative issues, I was harassed sometimes in atheist groups and called names. And one group, an administrator, said I was a problem because I would speak up for my views when people would challenge me. And so I said I wanted to create a group where Republican atheists are represented, and I wanted to bring more awareness in the atheist community that there are Republican atheists, there are conservative atheists. I know this seems like common sense to some people that, well, of course there are Republican atheists, but there's been a number of people I've encountered who are like, well, I never met a Republican atheist before. I didn't even know that can exist. I've met atheists and religious people who have both said that they've never met a Republican atheist before. And so that's kind of what influenced me to launch Republican Atheist. It wasn't launched to focus specifically on policies, because some atheists ask me that. Well, they'll ask me what my stances are on certain issues. And that's not really what I created it for. I created it to just build awareness for Republican atheists or atheists who are registered Republican, and to just build an awareness that we even exist.
Because you have to have awareness in order to gain respect, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of confusion about the Republican Party altogether. And, I see this because I attended university in Southern California, and I kind of grew up with this mentality that Republican equals religion. And I never took interest in politics personally for a long time because I didn't identify with the Democratic Party. And at the same time, to me, Republican meant religious. And so I was just kind of out in limbo for a long time. I didn't even register to vote, didn't participate in politics. And now I'm kind of getting more involved and realizing that there's just a lot of misconceptions. And so I need to communicate more. That's my goal, is just to communicate, introduce myself to people, and kind of connect with people who are on the same level, I guess, in terms of our thinking.
Yeah, okay. That makes sense. Yeah, we know a few atheists here locally who are Republican. One's a lawyer, and the other...
Just because they happen to be assholes, I don't hold that against them.
And the other one is he's a member, like a Republican Party precinct committeeman, or at least has been numerous times. He just went to law school. He's a Army retiree. He's been on the Mountain Home City Council, and he's been accused by many of being a rhino. And he's also had kind of a bit of a goal of getting more moderate Democrats in Idaho to start working within the Republican Party to try to shift the party from far right back towards the middle a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's what's happening as time goes on is I think after this presidential election, many people are taking interest now in the Republican Party and more conservative ideology, because there was just a lot of issues that happened during the campaign period where students were protesting against conservative speakers on college campuses, shutting down conservative speakers. Some of these speakers are even conservative atheists that tried to speak on college campuses and were shut down, primarily in Southern California. And then there was the violence, many issues of people blocking roads. And so these events have really made people kind of take a closer look at what party they're affiliated with. And it's kind of opened this doorway for people to take interest in conservatism and the Republican Party. And so there's this effort to kind of connect with the moderate people with more moderate views, and to figure out how to participate.
Right.
Now, yeah, it's hard because the media portrays the Republican Party as this far-right, super conservative, neo-Nazi, pro-religious thing, when that represents maybe 5% of the Republican Party. And everybody else gets kind of washed into that.
Well, some of that's been just because of how effective the Tea Party element within the Republican Party has been able to gain control in Congress. And now that the moderates are finally starting to re-exert some influence, we might actually have what I would consider a viable Republican Party again.
I think that's what it's moving towards. A lot of people have been looking into the history of the Republican Party, and I personally started taking a look at it myself, and it's been noted that the Republican Party became very religious during the Reagan era.
Mm-hmm.
Before that, religion wasn't really a major part of the party. So
yeah, that was the Democrats then.
Yeah, the Democrats, well, even to this day, the Democrats are still fairly religious. It's just that religion has become more prominent in the Republican Party. But
Yeah.
It's been noted that there's many Democrat politicians that practically all of them are subscribed to some form of religion, even on the Democratic side. It's just that it has been more extreme in the Republican Party. But yeah, some people are just taking a look at the history. How did this happen? And I think that there is an effort for more moderate change in the party.
Well, I certainly hope so, because it's really hard to equate that far-right 5% with any kind of humanism.
Yeah, there is definitely extremism in it, and I bring this up to other atheists actually. And what's really interesting is when I communicate with atheists who are in Europe, and I'll say, well, the right is religious because that's how we perceive it in the U.S. But many atheists in Europe will say there's no issue there. Like, they don't see the issue of conservative atheism, because in Europe the right-leaning parties aren't very religious at all.
And it's more the left-leaning parties that are.
Yeah, so in the U.S. there is this, it's a bit unique because the Republican Party, being the more right-leaning party, has kind of used religion as a crutch. And but in Europe it's not that way. So I think there's a similar change happening in the U.S.
Well, I think one of the problems is just the two-party system. Because you end up, instead of having actual ideological parties, you have coalitions of ideologies with compromising and agreeing to work on each other's issues. The only thing that really seems to have been consistent through the Republican Party has been the pro-business interest. All of the rest has kind of restructured periodically.
I think so. I can't speak too much on the specific history of the Republican Party because I have to be very honest with you. I haven't taken interest in politics for some time now. It was just this, the past 2 years, I started taking a closer look at politics, wanting to get more involved in politics. And so I'm gradually learning more about the history of the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, and the third parties. But I'm at a point now where I'm just simply taking interest in it. So
okay.
Yeah.
So as far as those conservative philosophies that you think are not anti-humanistic, what would you say those are?
Well,
and I know that's a really big question.
Yeah, it's kind of a broad question, but from what I've acknowledged, a lot of the topics that Republicans are concerned about, and the more left-leaning side will say, well, that's anti-humanism. It's really interesting for me to communicate with Republicans and find that they have their perspective of humanism. It's kind of like people have this different concept of what humanism is. So, for example, on the left, more left-leaning ideology, they don't promote, or there's this more effort on taking guns away from people because they believe that there will be there's more murders and crime because of people having guns. But from the right side, they think that they are able to protect themselves. They're able to protect their neighbors. It's like this interesting difference in what humanism is. A big issue, and I mentioned this before, I focus a lot on mass migration. I'm located in Europe right now. Mass migration has been a huge topic here for the past few years, especially in 2015 when many refugees from the Middle East and parts of Africa started pouring into Europe. This has been an issue, I think, that's been a big discussion in conservative communities. And so, for example, when I was in the U.S. before April 2016, I recall many Americans were saying we should let refugees in, we need to help these people, because that's considered a humanist thing to help people, let them into the country. But I was concerned because, you know, I knew a lot of these people are coming from the Middle East, where Islam is the main religion. It's a completely different culture there, a lack of education and things like that. So I was more concerned about the communities and the citizens of the countries accepting the refugees, you know, because I said, what are they going to bring with them? Will there be an increase in crime? How is the education system going to handle this? And so that's kind of a perspective from the right-leaning community, is they're concerned about the safety of their own people, I would say. And so that's their idea of humanism.
But one of the, I used to be Republican. I was very conservative politically, ridiculously conservative politically. And I would now consider myself to be pretty left-leaning, and I am actually a registered Democrat. The biggest change for me was looking at the ideologies and what was behind the ideology. So with guns, Democrats want more gun control. Republicans want guns to protect themselves. Gun control is demonstrated through copious amounts of data to reduce crime rates, at least reduce the lethality of crime. Whereas wanting to protect yourself against criminals is fear. You're afraid, so you want a gun, and the evidence shows that gun is more likely to be used on yourself or a loved one. And that weakens the argument. The same thing I've seen with the anti-refugee argument. Refugees, the data shows they do not increase crime rates, and they are more likely than native-born citizens to start businesses. But there's fear that they will.
Well, I've been studying news in Sweden, and I live here. I have a Swedish boyfriend who's born and raised here in Sweden, so I have all these resources that I keep up with. And I've seen people put up reports that the refugees haven't sparked an increase in crime, but based on my research, I don't agree with that, and I really want to get to the source of who's putting out that information, because I've been following news in Sweden, and ever since it was primarily in 2015, approximately 165,000 refugees came into Sweden, and crime did increase. And the Swedish government, this is something I also keep into concern, is what type of information the government puts forth. And I think Americans can't understand this so much because you're not in Sweden. Compared to me, I'm in Sweden. I can turn on the Swedish news every day and see how they present issues. How do they present crime? Do they even present crime? I mean, there's been cases here in Sweden where the police won't release reports. They're also very vague about who's committing the crimes because, it's important to keep the public in a certain mindset. But I would say that there is an increase in crime in Sweden. And this is shown through the Swedish police have more and more money having to be given to Swedish police. Swedish police are walking off the job. There's been reports of this where Swedish police have actually had to lower the intelligence test in order to recruit police because many have left their work claiming that they're not paid enough. They're not prepared enough either. So, I mean, there's just all these different stories to resort to. And personally, from what I've read, I see that there has been an increase in crime. And I mean, what does that say about police walking off the job in Sweden. It's very difficult to get a gun in Sweden. It's a lot of people don't have guns. If they do, it's probably for hunting. But many people are scared because the police have been walking off the job. The police haven't been doing a good job at protecting society. And so there's actually been increase in demand for guns in Sweden from the citizens, primarily because they don't feel prepared. So this is what I'm trying to present, is that there's just a dynamic here of what is humanism, what is protection, what is crime. And so there's reasons behind why people would have more conservative ideology.
160,000 refugees going into a country with a population of, Sweden's got 5-6 million people total?
About 9 million.
9 million. Okay. That's still a lot. That would be a sufficient amount to overtax the country's social welfare programs, overtax the education system, and poverty and crime definitely have high correlations, especially poverty among marginalized groups within society.
Well, I think we're talking about two different monsters here. I think we're talking about European migration, which I've been watching a little bit of because I'm American. Everything is about America. But no, the European migration problem is I think if you lived there, you would be of the more conservative mindset about refugees, just because there's been so many in the past couple years. Well, America, we can accept more and spread them out more evenly to not tax a certain population.
Well, we can also be more selective because we have an ocean between us and
they can't just
where they're coming from.
Float over.
I got to see it firsthand with how bad it can get when I spent 6 weeks in Jordan on an archaeological dig. Literally half of their population is refugees. In some cases, multi-generation refugees. And when you have that high of a percentage, you just can't handle it. Their society is largely broken because they don't have the infrastructure for it. They don't even have the water for that many people.
Yes, it's very interesting. And so when I was in the U.S., this was when I first started hearing about mass migration, was a few years ago when I was in the U.S. I think it was 2014 or so. That was when I started seeing a lot of news and information going out. I remember it was like a viral subject for a long time on Facebook, and many Americans said we should accept these refugees, no questions asked, and I knew that, again, these refugees are coming from this part of the world that's just so different. And I had a lot of questions, but I just remember many people supported it, and anyone who opposed it, I remember in atheist groups, I opposed it, and I said, we need to kind of put some more thinking into this before we just let so many people in. And I remember many people just spoke down on me, said I was inhumane, but now we can see what's happening in Europe, that it's reasonable to be concerned about a type of people who are entering a country. It's reasonable to be concerned about immigration, to be concerned about how people are managed when they enter. And so I think this is what's influencing a lot of people to take more interest in...
I have to stop you there. If you're saying that a type of people is dangerous, that is 100% definitely anti-humanist. You're saying that those people, because of something about them, do not deserve safety. If your concern is about quantity, I think that's reasonable. If your concern is about who it is, that's xenophobic.
Well, there are different ways to look at it, of course. But I speak a lot from, again, what I've read in Sweden, not just Sweden, but Europe. I've kept up with how the EU has been promoting mass migration in Europe, and it is a concern. And I'm really, disappointed that it's been summed up by many people as xenophobic or racist, when this is a really pressing issue. There has been an increase in rape. There has been an increase in crime in Sweden. And, I'm really disappointed that many people aren't speaking more about it in the United States.
But still, if it's about who it is that's migrating versus how many, that's where I think the big difference is.
Well, it's a unique perspective from an atheist point of view, too, because if you're an atheist and you think all religion is bullshit, basically, not politically correct, but anyway, the fact that that most people who are refugees right now are Muslim, it just adds another layer of bullshit to it.
Right. Like in Boise, we get 10,000 or so refugees over the course of several years, mostly from Muslim majority countries. Most of these refugees are Muslim, and they start restaurants and don't commit crime. But it's also a small percentage of the population, and we can handle it. Would you be as concerned about 150,000 Ukrainian refugees moving to Sweden as you are about 150,000 Arab Muslim refugees?
Well, I've given thought to that. I've thought, would this be as much of an issue if Americans had to move overseas for whatever reason or had to immigrate to another country? And I personally would not be so concerned, primarily because I look at the backgrounds of where these people are coming from, what culture are they coming from. And, after living in Sweden now for a period of time, I personally see many parallels between the American society and the Swedish society. I mean, we travel back and forth all the time. Swedish people go to America all the time. Americans travel to Sweden. And we have these similarities in our culture and our society. We value education and infrastructure and things like that. But, when we have the more cultures that are found in the Middle East, it's very different there. And so that's why there's a concern there. It's just our cultures are just so different. Our values of religion is so different. And that's the reality of it.
Okay, I think I see where you're coming from. I disagree wholeheartedly, but I think I know where you're coming from. So, I can respect that. But when it comes, for what we've seen here is from refugees is that they do respect education. They want stability. They do well in a stable environment. It's just where they're coming from isn't stable. And
it is hard on the schools. They're having to teach.
I have to admit, that's a problem.
They're having to teach English to people with 110, 120 native languages. That is difficult. That is a taxing stress, but I still see it as a difference in scope. Okay, so I'm going to try a different comparison. So you said you'd be more okay with 150,000 American refugees. How about 150,000 Syrian Christians?
It comes down to what is the background of where they live. Again, their values, their culture, how similar are they? And so this is what happened in Sweden, and still happens to this day. When many of the refugees were coming into the country, there were some people who I guess they had red flags go up and say, wait, who are these people? Because what Sweden did was they placed them in various communities throughout the country, tried to spread them out evenly. And so, of course, you're going to have people sometimes who are just like, okay, I want to know more about these people. What is their background? Where are they coming from? And anyone who asked these questions were shot down immediately. They were called xenophobic. They were called racist. And people had this mentality of, let's just welcome them. Who cares about their background? Who cares about where they're coming from? Let's just welcome them because they need help. And so Sweden didn't even put in effort into documenting the people entering the country, figuring out what their true age was, because many of them came into the country claiming that they were 15 years old because, more preference is given to children. And now we're finding out that many of them are actually 25, 30. And Sweden's actually having to put money into doing tests on dental, like on teeth, to figure out what their true age is. So ultimately, people who ask questions about the culture were shunned. And I thought this was very naive, I guess, and somewhat ignorant, because we should be aware of who's coming into our communities, especially when it's this many people. We should understand what are their values, what is their religion, how do they treat each other, and this kind of helps us integrate them into society. And so that's what I'm aware of. Is I try to ask what do they value. We're unfamiliar with this culture for the most part. I mean, in the West, we're familiar with each other. Like I said, Swedes travel to the U.S., Americans travel to Sweden, and Europe in general. We kind of have an understanding of each other. But in this case, it was very interesting that this culture coming in that's so different, so unique, religiously different, yet people were shut down from asking questions because I think many people considered it inhumane to take a close look at who's entering the country, and many people considered it racist. And now there's a lot of challenges happening in Sweden. Again, having to figure out what's their true age, how do they treat women. We're gradually learning how the men typically view women. And it has been pressing. There have been challenges in the public education system. It's going to be very interesting to see how this rolls out over the next decade or few decades.
Okay, this is going to sound like I'm beating a dead horse, but if it'd been 20,000, do you think that would have been okay?
20,000 refugees?
Yeah.
Does the quantity matter?
The quantity matters. If it was, refugees have been coming to Europe for a long time, and that's not, 165,000 refugees was just a lot to take in 1 year. And I would say if it was a smaller amount, it'd be fine. See, but this is definitely becoming a challenge.
Because that's
the more...
Yeah, that's where, when I see the concerns are about, if it's just worded as these people are weird and foreign and scary, that sounds irrational to me. When it's these people have a different culture and we can't handle integrating in that quantity, that sounds more reasonable. And if instead of taking 165,000, you say, okay, we'll take 50,000 because we think we can handle that, that seems a lot more reasonable.
Yeah, that's understandable.
The problem was Europe had a wall of refugees that did not have anywhere to go. So a lot of countries were kind of forced to take in more people than their infrastructure could handle. And I think her concern is that the same thing could happen to America very easily, where we get inundated with refugees that can't make it into Europe anymore because there's no more room.
And I can see how it'd be easy to, since, I did try to do it, it's easy to dismiss your views as just being xenophobic, because there are elements to it that can be construed that way, but it's a lot more nuanced than that. So that's definitely good to see.
Yeah, that's been one of my primary efforts with Republican Atheist and doing the outreach that I'm doing, because I know for a fact that when I introduce myself to in atheist communities on Facebook and I mention the word Republican, many of them are just immediately turned off. I was in one group that I said I'm president of Republican Atheist, and it was a free thinkers group, and one of the main members said, well, you're welcome here, but we forgive you for saying the R word. And I said, wow, what a great introduction to a free thinker group. When I first started voicing my conservative views, I began asking, and I noticed there was a lot of opposition towards me in atheist communities. I began asking around, is there an atheist community or an atheist or Republican atheist organization? And I was surprised to learn that there was none. Many people pointed me to David Silverman of American Atheists because he had represented American Atheists at CPAC and kind of spoke up for conservative values. But, I was like, well, that's not an actual conservative atheist group, though. And so that's why I launched this group. And to be quite honest, I wouldn't have ever seen myself doing this.
So how many people are in your group?
A couple years ago. Well, right now it's me as the president, and then I have a board member, Bob Price. You might be familiar with him. He's a noted speaker, podcaster.
We've interviewed him before.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. He's nice to communicate with.
5
he's a
years
really
ago.
good resource.
Oh, it's been a while then.
It's been a long time, yeah.
Oh, he's still around. He's still participating and doing things. We also had a board member who was actually a voted in representative in New Hampshire. His name was Brandon Finney, and he recently received a bunch of coverage because he publicly noted his atheist views, and he was a Republican. So Friendly Atheist covered him. He got a bit of press.
Good for him.
And I reached out to him. I reached out to him, and he said, "Yeah, I'd like to participate in your group." But here's the thing about Brandon: he recently stepped down because he changed his party affiliation to Libertarian. So,
I'll try getting you in touch with our local Republican Atheist councilman. His
Oh, yeah,
he doesn't
yeah.
hide it all. His license plates are atheist.
Yeah.
He got his plates signed by Richard Dawkins.
Oh, wow. Yeah. If you know of any Republican atheists, we're always looking to reach out. And one of the things that I've said with Republican atheists is that I just really want to have conversation and critical thinking and trying to gain understanding, because I know there are many atheist groups, and there's actually conservative atheist groups on Facebook that are kind of, they've become little venting locations, I say, for atheists with conservative views who have been kicked out of other atheist groups. But a lot of them kind of just share memes and posts. There's really no organization. So with Republican Atheists, I said, I really want to have a group that's organized, that does public speaking, public engagements. And so we are looking for more board members, and anyone who wants to contribute is welcome. And the requirement is to be a registered Republican and a pronounced atheist.
Okay. Okay. One issue you've brought up a few times that I want to hear your views on a bit more is education. You specifically said you liked some of what Trump was saying about it. What exactly?
Well, he put Betsy DeVos, or he chose Betsy DeVos as the education secretary. And one of the things that was noted was school choice.
School choice is code word for publicly funded religious education.
Charter schools.
What Betsy DeVos wants is to shut down public education and make everybody go to private schools. In some cases, they'll be religious, and in the rest, a lot of them will be for-profit.
I think that is an issue, is the religious aspect of it. That's something I'm concerned about too as well. But when I think of school choice, though, I don't just limit it to religion. And I think this is what I generally see in the atheist community when they discuss Betsy DeVos is, it's all about religion. And, from my perspective, it extends further than that, because as I said, the majority of the public education system, the staff, the teachers are subscribed to the Democratic Party, have a more liberal ideology. And so I kind of question what would happen if the traditional public education system was challenged, because many people are voicing concerns right now all over the U.S. about the ideologies that are put forth in the school system.
What I see as the bigger issue is private schools, even with charter programs and voucher programs, are still allowed to be selective. And my concern there isn't with the, not taking gay kids or atheist kids. It's that they're not going to take handicapped kids, special needs kids. Who they are going to take is the best and the brightest. And when you remove those kids from the public schools and you take the money for them, that means there is less money for the special needs kids. And it doesn't cost $50,000 or $60,000 or whatever it is for the average amount to educate a student in a public school. It doesn't cost that much for your average student. It costs a lot more than that for the special needs kids. And if you take that money away, it hurts them.
Well, I think we're going to have to see what happens. I just read an article about Texas voting in favor of allocating funds to private schools specifically for handicapped students. So, we could see more efforts increase to help students. I think this is just really experimental right now, and I'm very interested to see what happens, actually. If it does become more religious, or what exactly is going to happen with it. I just personally have... I'm just not a fan of the traditional public education system, and I'm interested to see what happens with things like school choice and discussing more of different schools' approaches to education.
Of course, we're from Idaho, so there aren't that many schools within drivable distance for you to choose from. There's like one high school, maybe two that you can go to. The charter school options here are definitely religiously motivated. They don't want to teach evolution. They do want to use the Bible as a resource. And they don't care so much about, the parental choice issues or where the money is coming from. They want to make schools profitable like a business. And unfortunately, it's going to leave a lot of people behind.
there's going to be issues. I'm definitely concerned about that. But again, I think it's experimental, and I question sometimes why don't atheists become more involved in school.
That the public education system is broken because too many kids are getting left behind, and it favors a very bright minority. If you're naturally gifted and you happen to have the right resources, aka you're rich, then you do fairly well. But for everybody else, you're kind of getting left behind. And it's going to take a couple different tries, I think, to try and find something that's more equitable.
Yeah, I'd be more okay with it as an experiment if it was being done in one state. But
yeah, the whole country is... Betsy DeVos, we're not fans.
Yeah, her goal isn't to experiment with it. Her goal is to transform the system, and I think the approach she is going with is the lazy and probably corrupt approach.
I think they're seeing it as a business opportunity, and it shouldn't be. And you look at her welfare.
You look at her background; she was a lobbyist for charter schools, and filthy
That's
rich.
her background.
So she has an ideological bent. She's not a professional educator. I think she is woefully underqualified for the job that she's in. And so her only solution to the problem, because this is the only thing she knows, is, shut down the public school system. Poor people don't need an education.
Well, I don't necessarily see her as shutting down the school system, but it's definitely a challenge to the school system. And I think that's what the education system needs, is a challenge for people to start stepping up and saying, you know what, I'm not a fan of how the school's being operated. So now there's more opportunities for my child to go elsewhere. And I think that's going to really make educators in the public education system think differently and try to think of things in a different manner.
But that's not they don't have the power to actually fix things. They need legislation to improve things because they are just civil servants doing what the state tells them. And if the legislatures aren't trying to reform the education system, and instead they're just trying to fracture it, they're not going to be trying to actually improve the public system. And that's where we need the reform. I see school choice as the lazy way out.
I see it as an experiment, and I see it as I know we can say, well, let's change the public education system, but to me, that's like trying to move a mountain. I mean, it's so much red tape, so much bureaucracy. I'm a outcome of the public education system myself, and I don't even know the first thing of how to get involved, how to learn what where meetings are, and I find that many parents don't participate in school meetings. The public in general doesn't know how to go to school meetings and keep up to date with what's happening in the public education system. As a society, we just don't participate in that. And so it's when I think about it, it's just overwhelming to me.
It's a societal mindset that needs to change, where parents are becoming more involved in the schools, and not just for when their kids are there, but like all the time.
It really is. And that's something I promote in general is, for example, if my neighbor has a kid, it's like, I try to view it as that's not just their kid. I mean, that's in a sense my kid. I mean, that kid can break the windows to my house, or it could possibly help me with something. We have to take more concern about the public education system. And I just don't see that happening. And it's very difficult. I did a community experiment for 2 years when I was living in California to try to get people more involved in the local politics. And it was really, really challenging to do this. And I would go to meetings, water board meetings, school meetings, and oftentimes I would be one of the youngest people there. I was like 28 years old at the time. I mean, most people at the water board meetings that I went to talk about local politics and what's happening locally were maybe 60 years
retired.
old.
Basically.
Yeah, so it was just, and people say, well, people are working, but I don't, I just think there's a lack of stimulation to get people more involved in the community. And this is something I turn to with the public education system and say, why are we producing students that can't even don't know how to attend a local water board meeting? Yeah. So
I also see it as part of a much larger, bigger issue of our economy is not growing like it should be. The tax pool is not growing. And we've reached a point where the legislatures, including Congress, are afraid to tax, which means they can't fund things. Idaho, our schools are not adequately funded. Washington, the state legislature is in contempt of court for not properly funding the education system. And it's because they're afraid to add an income tax because they can't go any higher on the sales tax. Idaho is already taxing the middle class as much as they can, and they're afraid to tax Vandersloot and Simplot, so they're not going to. And
big business, basically.
The big businesses, the super rich of Idaho. And in the meantime, our schools can't buy textbooks, and our highways are at best getting maintenance only.
Yes, it's an issue with funds allocated, and I'd like to learn more about that, about funds being allocated to what. But generally speaking, I don't see taxation to be a solution to the issue. I think that the education system needs to be looked at. I mean, for example, when I was in university, the textbooks, I remember just within a couple years at university, I had to buy a new textbook for classes, and some teachers would say, "Oh, you can get the old textbooks. That's fine to use, which were cheaper." And I would say, "Thank you."
Mm-hmm. Right,
but
because
I mean,
textbook industry is a business, and they have to make profit.
Yeah. So that's something that I take into concern is, how can things be managed just a little differently so that we don't have to keep buying new textbooks and we don't have to keep investing in things like that.
But there's also the big issue of the state schools. Their budgets haven't kept up with inflation and haven't kept up with the increase in technology costs. So tuition keeps rising. In the 1970s, a Pell Grant and a minimum wage job for the summer was enough to pay your way through school without any debt. Now, a Pell Grant, a couple scholarships, and a minimum wage job, or better if you can get it, all through the summer and 20 hours a week during the school year, you're still looking at $30,000 in student loans by the time you graduate at a public school.
Right. It's all interconnected, in my opinion. And like I said earlier, I kind of view it as a mountain that we have to move, and it can be very challenging. So with the school choice, with looking at what other options are out there, that's what I'm particularly interested in. And I'm interested to see how much this challenges the public education system and to take a different approach.
Well, we've got a little one baking in the oven, so we're going to find out in about 5 years.
Yep.
Oh, congratulations.
And I really hope the Boise School District isn't bankrupt by then.
Oh, we're not going to stick around for that.
Or wherever we are then. All right. Well, we are out of time.
Oh my gosh, it has been awesome talking to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on the show.
Yeah, and where can people find more about you and your group? What do you got to plug?
We have a website, republicanatheist.com, that I keep up to date. We're also on the main social media platforms like Facebook, Twitter, that we keep up to date. We have an official Facebook group, so if you want to participate in conversation, share articles, you can do so. And then you can reach me at info@republicanatheist.com.
All right. Thank you very much.
It's been very enlightening. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We may not have agreed on anything, but that was still a really fun interview, and I'm glad that we did it. So all that remains now is to remind you that not all those who wander are lost. Thank you for listening to another episode of Atheist Nomads. You can find show notes and contact information at atheistnomads.com. Follow us on Twitter at Atheist Nomads, and like us on Facebook at facebook.com/atheistnomads. Please subscribe to the show in iTunes, Stitcher, or your podcatcher of choice, and while you're there, feel free to leave us a review. Theme music is courtesy of Sturdy Fred. Until next time, this has been the Atheist Nomads.